Okay, great. So now the webinar is being recorded. So Xavier, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Could you hear me? Yes, okay. Thanks, Fernando, and welcome to everybody to this webinar. My name is Xavier Lemaire. I'm located in the UK, Center for Management Under Regulation. So I'm coordinator of a network which is called the Sustainable Energy Regulation Network. We deal with regulation mainly to promote renewable and energy efficiency. The topic of today of grid regulation, I have a particular interest in rural electrification. I worked in the field for quite a long time now. So I conceive a presentation which is mainly an introduction because it's can be a very complex topic. So I hope it won't be too vague or generalities, but anyway, it's just an half an hour introduction, and then if you have more precise questions, I can answer them either during the 20 minutes of question and answer or afterwards. So what we'll do, first just briefly current status of grid regulation and rural electrification developing countries, so that's only a very brief introduction. I want to focus more on emerging forms of rural decentralized electrification with some case studies, and then to conclude with the main features of a good off-grid regulation framework. So, first part, well, we know that the electrification rate can be very different, as you can see on this graph. I think I have a possibility to have an arrow. So, in South Asia and also in sub-Saharan Africa, the rate of electrification is still very low and far under the world average. So this situation is not going to improve according to some prevision. The number of people without electricity will increase for a while, mainly once again in South Asia and Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. So we do have quite high disparity between continents. This is linked to historical reasons and also the demography, but also maybe a lack of political commitment and financial resources. Both are linked. Let's say rural inhabitants are very far from decision makers. So there is a bias in favor of extension of the grid, and it gives decision makers tend to give priority to urban areas. Remote areas with low density are out of reach. This logic can continue for a long time because conventional utilities tend naturally to ignore areas difficult to reach, not only because they are very remote, but also because income in those places can be very low, and also electricity has to be produced by decentralized systems. So regulation and can, if they are not adapted, will continue to favor centralized systems and ignore small decentralized generation, which leaves rural inhabitants in the dark or leaves them to a kind of scheme where in fact small private investor will just put a genset and draw lines. So totally unregulated electrification scheme. So this logic we'll try to synthesize. You have this kind of vicious cycle where priority is given to urban areas. Tariffs in some African countries, for instance, can be very low, so electric companies do not have money to extend the network, and rural areas remain so not connected. So this is very brief introduction. Of course, we could detail a bit more. So now I would like to show that we do have cost-effective delivery models that are emerging in developing countries. Against the bias in favor of centralized systems, you do have mini-grids and home systems which can be implemented and regulated in different ways. You do have so the situation in rural areas can be very diverse. So you have different typologies according to the technology used, according to the form of ownership, according to the delivery model. The matrix you can find when you do a literature review can be quite complex. Of course, in this presentation we will have to focus on some part of the matrix, some kind of combination of technology ownerships and delivery models. So here is an extract from a document from the World Bank. It's a working paper, which is a very good working paper. So this matrix, you can see different form of ownerships, and of course after that the typology according to the kind of system implemented. So is it grid extension, connected mini-grid, or isolated mini-grid, or single user systems? So you can see various parts of the world mentioned in this matrix. It is as you can see, very you can find very different way of delivering electricity in rural areas. As I have a background more in solar electricity, I will focus on this technology. Now I have to say the principles are the same, whatever is the technology considered. So solar is quite interesting for rural electrification because well, cost of solar panels are going down, decreasing very quickly, and this is linked to the growth rate of the photovoltaic market, which is some years, of course not in 2009, but previously it was something like 30–40% per year. So the cost of photovoltaic panels tend to decrease, but one has to say that in a solar installation, the panels are only just a part, let's say half of the cost of the total cost of the systems, and then you have to take into account batteries and also the installation cost. So in this with this technology, you do have still a quite high initial investment. So for a 50 watt peak system, which is something with that you can deliver electricity, let's say, for few light bulbs and one or two sockets for TV or radio. So the cost is still around between 500 or 1,000 US dollar. So the interest of solar is for remote areas or scattered houses, and only with low loads. And then this technology is quite interesting compared to, of course, use of candles, which is very common still in some places, or diesel generation, or of connection to the grid, which is sometimes totally impossible because the places are very remote. So grid is grid PV. PV in North America, Europe, China may soon compete with conventional energies because the costs are decreasing very quickly, and so it may be that very in the, let's say, in few years you will have this technology will be very widespread, even without subsidies. Now the question is how rural areas could benefit from this technology. And I think it's a paradox of solar energy. It is where it is it could be very useful, it remains quite expensive for a lot of reasons, but as I've said, you need to add batteries, and the installation costs are very high. So the difficulty is to try to reduce the cost and to have an institutional and regulatory framework which could improve the situation of rural areas. I think the trend is to promote, there's a kind of consensus now in the literature, to promote public and private partnership. Nevertheless, rural electrification, you still need subsidies, so need access to, otherwise, to specific sources of funding. I think, and we'll see it in the presentation, the main important point is to have a clear definition of who is responsible of the systems once they are installed, and do the monitoring. And also, I've talked about solar because it's my point of, I will base my presentation on this, but of course solar cannot do everything, and so the fact is, how do you combine conventional and new technologies? And I will emphasize also the importance of a long-term commitment of public authorities. So in the field of solar, in particular, there has been a change of paradigm. We are moving from something which was mainly focusing on technology to a market, and we tend to have, well, I will switch to the next slide. We tend to have a new generation of project where energy is not viewed just as a technical problem. In fact, it is what we now emphasize are the delivery of a service. So it's not just to sell and install a product. We emphasize also now more the maintenance of system. It is something where the end user needs to pay against first generation of project where end user were considered as only receptor of the technology, and this well implies selection of clients according to their income, and a selection of local entrepreneurs who can maintain systems. So as it is market driven, this implies also some kind of regulation of the market. We have now, compared to the 80s, 90s, far larger scale projects than previous projects, which enables economies of scale and economies of density. So currently, according to some estimates, we have more than 2 million households with solar systems. So it's getting a quite high figure, but of course it's very marginal compared to the total number of inhabitants of rural areas without electricity. You have two major way of disseminating. One is we call it the dealer sales model. It's mainly finally just the sale of a small solar panel with a battery. A good example is the example of Kenya, or you find also this model, delivery model in Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Indonesia, India, Bangladesh. No, another way of disseminating solar systems is the fee for service model. So this is something I've had the opportunity to survey in South Africa or in Zambia, for instance, and it can be mainly photovoltaic or hybrid. You have countries where you combine a genset and sometimes grid connection, and also well, not grid connection, mini grid and photovoltaic. So the cash sale models. This is a classic example of the case of Kenya, where more than 200,000 solar systems have been installed. Some estimates are far higher. I found figures of 350,000 systems. But it's a very simple system. You buy your system in a shop, and mostly people buy part of the system. They don't buy the whole system at once. So the problem with this model is, as people don't have access to credit, they buy very small systems. So first, only a minority can afford to buy directly a system without credit. And second point, another limit, people buy the cheapest components, and the size of the system is too small, so customers are not satisfied. And you do have problem also with installation. Which leads, combined with lack of maintenance, to early systems failure. So another model is a credit sales model. So that is also a classic, very known example is a company called Sudimara in Java in Indonesia. Here the idea is still to sell photovoltaic systems, but you give credit, so people can afford a system, a 50 watt peak. And the interesting point is you do have maintenance contracts with trained technicians. So the systems function and provide reliable electricity for a long time. And on top of that, the cost of the systems are very low because components are manufactured in Indonesia. So the interesting thing in this case is as the company who sells is the same as the one who maintains the systems, people have continue to pay to reimburse their credit because they are satisfied with the system. I have to say this is not mentioned on the slide. This company has been through, even if the business model is quite interesting, this company has been through a lot of financial difficulties at some point. So, and this is the case for all the small business I will present. Is they're all very fragile and they're all dependent from conditions which are a bit out of their control. In this case, devaluation of the rupiah, which against the dollar, as of course a lot of components are imported. So the last model I will introduce is the utility model, also called fee-for-service. So in this case, the government gives a subsidy to an enterprise to buy PV solar system and install them in the houses of their clients, and the clients pay a monthly fee to get the small utility to maintain the PV solar systems. So I found this scheme I've surveyed first time notably in Zambia, very quite interesting in the sense that you do solve the question of upfront costs and the question of maintenance, unlike a simple loan. So to have this kind of small enterprise also helps to centralize decisions. It can help also to aggregate environmental benefits of individual systems. It's also, and you have to take into consideration, it facilitates enforcement of standards and codes of practices, and it could therefore lower cost of systems for users. One example is a picture taken in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. So you can see the small solar panel on top of the roof of this house. So I will detail a bit the case of South Africa. South Africa has launched a massive rural electrification effort after the apartheid, and more than 2.5 million households have been connected to the grid, but there are still more than 1.5 million households which are located in remote areas, so very unlikely to be connected in the short term. So the government had the idea of launching concession with fee-for-service using solar photovoltaic. The initial project was to install more than 300,000 solar home systems. Currently, you do have only 5 concessions with, according to some figures, 34,000 solar systems. Some say a bit more, it can be 50,000 solar systems. And so subsidies have been stopped. So I will detail one concession, and I will after that put forward you for those who are interested, documents on this concession, which is located in KwaZulu-Natal. The Noura concession is one of the biggest of the 5 concessions. It is a very large concession of 10,000 square kilometers and with 11,000 solar home systems. So it makes 1 solar home systems every square kilometer, so its density is very low. You do have on the concession 8 multi-energy stores, because they sell not only solar electricity but also LPG, and well, you do have some economies of scale, 70 jobs created. Now the difficulty, of course, are linked to the size of the concession. The proximity of with the clients is quite clients are quite far from the stores, and so you do have delay in maintenance. So this, to solve this, it implies good systems of reporting of system failure, and they do use software and also good, very good human resource management. So I've been able to conduct a small field survey in this concession and go through documents from produced by the company. Well, people, of course, do have complaints linked to the size of the system, so that's very common with PV. Of course, you cannot cook with, that's also, and you don't have access, for instance, to color TV and things like that. So the cost of the fee is even subsidized very high for rural people, and you do have also difficulties with the contract itself. So plus lack of coordination with grid authorities. ESCOM tend to draw lines through the concession without which were not planned. You do have differentiated fees. So in South Africa you do have free basic electricity, which is so a subsidy given for the first 50 kilowatt hour per month. Now some municipalities do not give this subsidy for solar systems. So you do have different interpretation of free tariff, and also, well, the last point, the concession were designed to for a higher number of systems. So the enterprise are just above their. This one is just above the break-even point, but initially each concession were supposed to have something like 50,000 solar home systems. So I will finish with my case studies. So it was very only been able to introduce few case studies. What is we draw some conclusion not only from the case studies but more from literature review. What could be an appropriate regulation for off-grid? So this is not just solar, or it's for every small enterprise located in rural areas. First thing, and is to avoid over-regulation. If you do have a small utility, small enterprise in rural areas who are well, have either a mini grid or several hundreds or several thousands solar systems, it's very difficult to apply the same regulation than for big utilities. So the licensing procedure and the monitoring should be different. The other thing is to have long-term socioeconomic comparisons to be able to compare all kind of energy on what we call life cycle projects, on the lifetime of the project. So compare renewable systems to hybrid solution or connection to the network, and also to integrate energy efficiency in the process. Consumer awareness is also very important. There are things that can be done with some kind of energy like solar, and some things that cannot be done. And so the level of expectation of end users is very dependent to what they hear and the discourse, and the regulators do have a role to play on this. Adapted standards. The higher the standards, the higher the cost. So we need to find a compromise of what is really needed in rural areas. And importance of tariff setting. You do have high inflation in a lot of developing countries, so it plus annual revisions. Tariff needs to take into account all the cost, and you do need to harmonize tariff, as we've seen in the case of South Africa. Otherwise, it introduced difference between inhabitants. So I will detail a bit. I don't know if I will have time to go through all the slides.
You can go ahead, Xavier. There is no problem. I think
yes, I have
a very interesting presentation. You can take let's say 10-15 more minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So once again, a case. This is extracted from the document of the World Bank I've mentioned before. You need to recognize the impossibility of implementing conventional regulation for all utilities. So this case is the case of Bolivia. Here you do have mini-grids, and they were required by the law to acquire concessions, but concession could only be granted to shareholders companies and not cooperative. So that was the first difficulty. The second difficulty is the standards were too costly to satisfy by the operator of mini-grids. And third, in conclusion, it appeared that it would be better to have a light-handed regulation than to keep on with having a lot of multiple unlicensed operators. So there has been a consultant have proposed some intermediate solution and also possible regulation framework for the future. Well, the idea is just to have differentiated regulation according to the size of the operator. So, for instance, you can take a number of users, like 2,000 users, and you lower technical requirements for small utilities below 2,000 users, and you keep on with a high level of standards for bigger utilities. Another possibility is to take into account the size of the systems, that and so small operators do not have any obligation except to register themselves. otherwise, intermediate systems between 300 kilowatt and 1 megawatt, you do have some standards, but they are less stringent than for big utilities above 1 megawatt. So this is just an example. I do not know what happened after the election of the government, but I'm sure anyway it will move towards this kind of differentiated regulatory framework. So that is for the question of light-handed, what we mean by light-handed regulation. I've mentioned the optimal combination of different technology. The difficulty is to open the market to new entrants who can disseminate new technology, and so you do need appropriate planning where you take into account in the long term the cost and the way the small operators will be able to finance themselves and to keep the systems running. So, for instance, it implies not to select the cheapest when you bid, when they are bid for a concession. It's not necessarily the cheapest, lowest bid, which is the one to take, which will be the winner. But you need to take into account the capacity of the operators to maintain the systems in the long term. You do need an organization to evaluate local needs. You do need a rural electrification plan and strategy, and you do need to monitor and evaluate the schemes. Every time you can delegate or subcontract to local consultants or NGOs. Technology neutral, what it means? Well, it's when available renewable energy, solar photovoltaic, plus diesel generation, I see it more as a complement, not necessarily the main source. Diesel generation for productive use because, for instance, solar photovoltaic is too costly for productive use in most of the case. And you do need to take into account other energy needs and not just electricity. So after that, the choice will be linked to the location of the place to electrify, to the configuration of the village that needs to be electrified, and so it's a combination of technology, which a mix, in fact, which needs to be chosen. So this graph just for it's a village. It's a case where you have 100 households, and you take into account the cost of two kind of technologies, solar home systems. So solar home system, it is, if I can get the, no, I don't get the here. So the yellow line, and on you compare with the cost of mini grid generation. So it should appear here. So it is, so total cost is the green line. Of course, the yellow line, so it's strictly proportional to the number of households equipped with solar home systems, and the mini grid, so the line in green, the first unit connected is very expensive, and of course you can amortize cost when you increase the number of household connected. So this after that you select the good combination of which is here something like 20 houses which will be equipped with solar systems and 80 houses connected to the grid. This is mainly just to show that every case needs a specific survey and a specific analysis. So this is just to synthesize what I've just said about the necessity of life cycle costing, if possible on the total duration of the system, so it can be 20 or 30 years. To summarize, you do have with need to reduce upfront cost for notably for when you try to implement renewable energy. So you do need to have funding agencies. They can give subsidies, so that's a way of reducing upfront cost, and then you can spread upfront cost. So this is the other kind of institution where either with banks who give credit loans or small utilities, you spread the upfront cost, and as we've seen in the two examples I gave previously, you can also have the with the same organization maintain the systems. So what could be the institutional arrangement? Well, you the names of the organization in itself are not very important. What is important is you do have several functions, and each needs to be filled by a specific organization. So function of who defines rules for competition, integrated planning standards, so it can be the regulator. Operational measure, it can be the Rural Electrification Agency, and after that the small utilities are the organization who will collect fees and guarantee the functioning of the systems in the long term. So you do have a variety of approach possible for institutional design. The important thing is to make sure that all the functions are covered and to have a clear definition of who is responsible of what. So it is emphasized sometimes that it is in the case of grid regulation, it is important to delegate, and it is indeed important to delegate. The regulator or the rural electrification agencies are located very far from rural areas, and so in a the ideal solution is to also mobilize end users who can make complaints, but also can be mandated just to monitor the good functioning of the systems. And otherwise, it is also I think quite important to mention that the regulator is not necessarily here is not necessarily the regulatory body who will take in charge the function of controlling and establishing standards for rural electrification. It can be delegated to the Rural Electrification Agency, because the staff of this agency is already trained and in contact, in daily contact with ESCOs with utilities in rural areas. So this, it is exactly what I've just mentioned, the central role of Rural Electrification Agency. I think now a lot of African countries, for instance, are in the process of implementing rural agencies. So they will be very important interlocutor of local utilities. They do need to have their own financial resources and, if possible, so their own budget and some autonomy. Now for the utilities, I would think so. It is quite successful scheme is to have small entities who are very near their customer, and there's whatever, if they are cooperative or local private companies or association, they can be very reactive, and their survival is linked to the good functioning of the systems. So, for instance, if we take once again the case of solar companies, you can have either very small companies like in Zambia or some Pacific island, who have a very limited number of clients, or on the contrary, very large companies. Small companies means, well, proximity to the client, of course, but the cost of systems tends to remain quite high, and the customer base is limited. So they target only some customers and with the highest income, and they remain quite fragile. Large companies tend to create to have something, let's say, several thousand, so to 30,000 clients each. They can be multi-energy, so the problem with this kind of companies are linked to the complexity of managing local stores and to have a good system of reporting. So it's mainly linked to the logistic when you cover a very large area. Yes, I think now I will have a few words to say because I need to conclude. Code of practices. The fact is, first you need to establish standards for equipment that are installed. So standards can have a very high impact, and just for limited cost. The idea is to avoid substandards products imported or installed, and that is a very cheap way of to guarantee long-term consumer satisfaction. After that, you need to monitor, and this means to have audits or kind of audits, periodic control, what's going on, what are the utilities, small utilities are doing on the ground. So it can be, it implies to have staff specialized on rural electrification who can monitor small utilities. So I will just say awareness and training is really fundamental at every level. Level of regulators, level of technicians, and also some kind of training of end users. If local institutions can be involved, like universities, it is probably the best way of disseminating this kind of training. So few words on tariff setting, which is a function of important function of regulators. In the case of isolated individual systems, you do have just flat tariff. Most of the time it's not possible to have metering systems. Metering systems when end users are connected to some kind of mini grid. So how to fix tariff? Well, on the side of utilities, the higher the tariff is, the best it is. It needs at least to cover operating cost. Now, if it could cover part of investment cost, that will be very nice, because utilities can then expand to new customers. But if not, then public subsidies are continuously needed for expansion. Now, on the side of end users, of course, the point of view is quite different. And what happens is, most of the time, as we are in remote areas where people have very low income, this will be in fact the main factor to take into account. According to the structure of incomes and the percentage of inhabitants you want to reach, you will fix the fees or the tariff of electricity. And then you need, as you have a very high inflation rate, you need a procedure for annual revision. And when I say inflation rate, it can be something very high. So the problem is components, for instance, for solar are imported. And once again, you need to take into account on the other side the capacity of payment of end users who do not have income indexed to inflation. So, as just to give few elements of conclusion, you do need new institutions and new way of thinking, so for new way of thinking to take into account all kind of energies, all kind of technologies, and for that training is crucial. You need regulation adapted to small companies, otherwise you exclude new actors. So this may imply to limit the power market of existing utilities. If possible, rural electrification, notably with rural electrification agency who have some kind of autonomy, needs to be depoliticized. This, of course, is a wish. It's very difficult to get a completely depoliticized process of procedure of rural electrification. And this needs to be framed by a real long-term energy strategy. This means a long-term commitment of the government, and not just an energy policy, but also behind industrial policy. We've seen in the case of Indonesia, the cost when you manufacture components locally can be very low compared to imported components. So this implies to nurse a market which enables to create jobs locally and nationally, and to capitalize some kind of local expertise. So I think I will now just give say that, well, this was quite short presentation, even if a lot longer than I thought previously. So because I've taken almost 45 or 50 minutes. If you want to go further, there will be some references, documents will be implemented both on the website of RIP and also on the Leonardo website. Thank you.